Okay, we are in our 39 Melachot book, 39 Melachos by Rabbi Ribiat. We're discussing Muktzah, and we've been talking about different varieties of Muktzah. We had different categories. I'm just going to run through them again briefly. You have Muktzah, literally set aside, meaning you can't engage with it on Shabbos. Machmas gufo, because of itself, or muktzah by definition. And that's a category that refers to things that in and of themselves they have no designated use, like substance, like debris or rocks or stones, bricks, gravel, pebbles, sand, trash, fruit peels, meaning things that are, they don't have necessarily any sort of specific use. They're not really meant to be used. I mean, maybe stones and bricks could be used in a specific way, right? But as they are now, they haven't been set aside. So those are muktzah machmas gufo, muktzah by definition. Then we have something called muktzah machmas chesaron kis. Chesaron kis means a loss, a pocket, out-of-pocket loss, right? Meaning it's something that is very fragile or has great value, and it's not usually, it's not handled because of its fragility or great value. Meaning on a regular week, meaning you don't normally touch it. You don't just touch it, right, normally, because it has, either it's very fragile, it has great value, and that's chesaron kis. An example would be expensive ceramics, delicate china pieces used only for display, delicate family photographs, glassware. It could even be newly printed invitations or galley proofs. It doesn't have to be expensive in and of itself, just valuable for a particular use that is very, it's not ordinarily handled, right? And then you have, like we talked about, specialty items that like a ritual slaughtherer's knife, right? That's an item, that's an example of an item that's only handled for a specific use that is not generally permissible to do on Shabbos. Right? So if you have something that's a very specific item whose use is for something that's not permissible, right? But that would make it under the category of muktzah machmas isur. Okay? The last example is muktzah machmas isur, where it is set aside, it's not permissible to be used because of a prohibition. And that means that there's something intrinsically prohibited about using it on Shabbos, right? Meaning, in order to engage it would be a malacha, let's say if it's electric, or if it's muktzah because it has a use that's a designated use that's forbidden, like a hammer, right? So here, we should really. Yeah, I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read it inside again. I think this is super important. I'm just going to go through it again briefly. Okay? So we talked about our first category is muktzah machmas gufo, muktzah by definition, right? This includes any object or substance that has no intrinsic function and is not a designated utensil, vessel, or tool. Such objects are naturally set apart because they have no designated use, like debris, rocks, stones, bricks, gravel, pebbles, sand, twigs, grass clippings, soil, loose screws, bolts, bricks, money, trash, fruit peels, shells, pits, detached windows, doors, lumber, construction materials, inedible foods like raw potatoes. So, meaning all these things, they don't have necessarily any designated use as they are, okay? So, and then you have muktzah machmas chesaron kis. It means due to the item's fragility or great value, okay? So these include items and utensils that one would generally not handle at any time because of their fragility or great value, or items that because they are fragile or valuable would not be used for anything other than their specific non-permissible use and are not left lying around between uses. You use a screwdriver for anything you need on hand. But if you have, a specialized, let's say, pair of scissors that, fabric scissors that you don't, professional fabric scissors are not meant to be used even on paper because it would ruin the scissors. So, that would be chesaron kis as opposed to the hammer, which would just maybe be malachto le'isur, that its use is generally for something that is prohibited. Okay. So those we said are things like expensive ceramics, delicate china pieces, delicate family photographs, items set aside to be given away as gifts, etc. Okay. And then we said also that includes like a ritual slaughterer''s knife or a mohel's knife, right? Fragile carpentry tools, etc. Okay. Now we have Muktzah machmas isur, Muktzah due to prohibition. What does that mean? This is a category of Muktzah under which an object is Muktzah because of a prohibition appertaining to its nature or use. It is thus divided into two subcategories. Things that are Muktzah due to an intrinsic prohibition, which means they are prohibited for their designated uses and are basically useless for any other purpose, or whose handling could bring to a Shabbos transgression, are Muktzah under this category. Those would be, let's say, a garment made of shatnez material. You know, shatnez, you're not allowed to wear it. You know, so you can't wear it. It is an isur to wear it, and it's designated for something. It's designated to be worn, and you can't do that. So engaging with it on Shabbos is prohibited. Same for non-kosher food. If you can't use it. If it's non-kosher food that you're allowed to feed to your dog, meaning non-basar v'chalav, then it's not muktzah. Okay? So something that, because there's a prohibition, there's an isser from the Torah for you to use it the way it's meant to be used, therefore you can't engage with it on Shabbos. And then there are items that could lead to a transgression. They are muktzah machmas isur. They are muktzah due to a prohibition because they can cause a transgression. What's that? Like wet laundry. Wet laundry is muktzah because we are concerned that if you engage with it, you may come to wring it out or to dry it in a way which would be not permissible, right? Since it is not useful, wet laundry is not useful to you the way it is. You need it to be dry in order to use it. And you're not allowed to dry it on Shabbos. You can't wring it out because that would be like dush, which is extraction. Okay? It's like squeezing out lemon juice, right? You can't do that with your shirts. So therefore, wet laundry, if it's still wet to the point where it can't be used or you wouldn't wear it, when Shabbos comes in, it's totally muktzah. Okay?
What?
It's muktzah. You can't touch it. You can't touch wet laundry on Shabbos.
But if it's drying on the line already, it's okay.
Meaning, you're not using it. You can't. Meaning, if you left it somewhere before Shabbos, that's the way you have to leave it all of Shabbos. And if it's drying, that's fine. But however,
You can't hang it on Shabbos.
right. And then you also have a question. The question is, if it wasn't dry, let's say it's not dry right before Shabbos, and you throw it in the dryer, and you turn the dryer on right before Shabbos, so that you'll have it after Shabbos. And it's being dried on Shabbos. Now, you didn't do a malacha, you didn't initiate the dryer on Shabbos. You started before Shabbos, but it is getting dried on Shabbos. Now, will you be benefiting from something it's not, is it Chil Shabbos? Not Chil Shabbos. Are you allowed to benefit from a malacha that was done on Shabbos after Shabbos? Can you throw in your clothes right before Shabbos so that most of the drying happens on Shabbos for after Shabbos? Are you allowed to do that? Could you benefit from those clothes afterwards, or do you have to get them wet again?
Like if I watched it Friday afternoon and I put it on the clothesline.
Here's the question. Meaning, if most of it would not have gotten dry before Shabbos, most of the drying is being done on Shabbos, right? Could you benefit from that after Shabbos? Can I put a roast in the oven for after Shabbos, right before Shabbos? It's not for Shabbos. I'm not going to eat it on Shabbos.
I mean, hachana, it's like preparation.
Yeah, I'm doing something to prepare
days.
for after Shabbos, on Shabbos, but I'm not doing anything. I set it all up in motion before Shabbos. I'm not giving an answer now. I'm asking a question. Okay.
And
If I don't answer the question some time later, ask me again. But we're going to talk about these things. This is not where he talks about wet laundry, but you'll see when he talks about wet laundry, and he talks about it many times in the book, right? God willing, we'll talk about these things. Okay, so items leading to transgression. So it's muktzah because, and if you engage in it, you will most probably come to a malacha. So items whose use could lead one to do a malacha or other Shabbos transgression are muktzah and may not be handled. Wet laundry. Handling the laundry could lead one to wring out the moisture, which is forbidden because of schita, which is a tolda of dash. Okay? Schita is wringing something out. Dash is extracting it. Dash is when we separate the chaff from the grain. So we have, that's the av malach, and then we have all these toldot. One of them is schita, wringing out. Okay? So then now we have things, vessels and tools that would be muktzah because malachto le'isser, that its primary purpose is for Shabbos prohibited uses and activities. A hammer is used to secure a nail, which is bona, it's building. You're not allowed to build on Shabbos, so you can't play around with hammers, right? Most durable, not fragile electric appliances, such as a radio clock fan, etc. Right now, the reason why he says not fragile over here is because if it was fragile, it would already be included in the category of chisaron kis. Right? We said that there's things that are muktzah because they're so fragile. If they're very fragile, we don't handle them commonly. We try not to handle them. So those things, that's a category of muktzah. Here we're talking about electric appliances that in order to use them the way they're meant to be used, you have to initiate their electricity, and that's forbidden on Shabbos. Okay? Tefillin are muktzah because they are not permitted to be worn on Shabbos. Meaning, since you're not allowed to wear them, their use is a forbidden Shabbos activity, and therefore they're muktzah. That does not mean that there is never a case where you can handle your tefillin on Shabbos. We could talk about what happens regarding the laws of hotza'ah, from moving from one domain to the other. If you find tefillin on the street on Shabbos, what do you do? Okay, how do you handle them on Shabbos? But anyway, this last category, all these things that are forbidden because their use, meaning a hammer, like we've been talking about, we've been waiting since last time to get to the hammer. The hammer, even though its primary use is a Shabbos forbidden activity, since it's possible to engage with that item for something else that is permissible on Shabbos, like cracking open a walnut, we allow you under certain circumstances to handle that item for cracking a walnut. Or if another classic example we talk about is a match. A match is meant to start fires. You can't do that on Shabbos. But you could use a match to pick your teeth if you don't have a toothpick on Shabbos. Okay, so you see that the items, we're going to talk about this, but items that are in the category of melachto le'isser, that their main use is for a Shabbos prohibited activity, there is of those, there are items in certain conditions that in certain ways can be used. We're going to talk about it. Okay, so what are these, what's some more of this category? Empty pots and pans, which are used for cooking, right? You can't cook on Shabbos, so you can't mess around with your pots and pans. They're muktzah. Pencils, pens, paintbrushes, shoe and clothes brushes, toothbrushes, hammers, saws, screwdrivers, and most durable tools. Okay. Sorry? Well, according to this book, if it's not a Shabbos toothbrush, toothbrushes are very problematic, and you could be doing many things. It's not just about the toothpaste. It's also the level, the strength of the bristles on the teeth. He talks about it. Then we can decide how we feel about it. Okay.
You can't use a toothbrush or a brush?
There are those that insist on, there are those that don't brush their teeth on Shabbos with a toothbrush. And there are those that brush with a Shabbos brush, which is specially made to the specifications, I guess, of some halachic authorities. I don't really know about it because I don't use one. But the bristles are designed, first of all, that it shouldn't be absorbent, the toothbrush, and that the bristles are soft and don't have the same kind of resistance. He'll talk about it, the laws of brushing your teeth on Shabbos according to Rabbi Ribbiat. Okay, for most practical purposes, all categories of muktzah are subject to similar restrictions. Please don't be alarmed or feel bad if it becomes quite common. I warned everybody that this is going to happen. Hopefully this will happen because we all have room to improve in our knowledge of the laws of Shabbos and also of our practice. And don't be annoyed, but rather be grateful when he drops a bomb on us and we find out that there's something that needs terrible adjusting in our practices of Shabbos. We're going to learn a lot of things and be challenged by maybe how we do things already and maybe rethink things. So, okay, for most practical purposes, all categories of Muktzah are subject to similar restrictions. However, Melachto le'isur, this last category that we just discussed, is fundamentally different. There's something special about this category. Such items ordinarily have some practical use of a permissible nature. Their laws are therefore much more lenient than those of other types of Muktzah, as shall be explained further. The general rules of Melachto le'isur. One is permitted to move this type of item for one of two purposes. The hammer, you can move if it's litzorach gufo. If it's, he translates litzorach gufo here as personal need. Or, alternatively, number two is litzorach mekomo, if its space is needed. See, I don't know why he calls it personal need. I would think, if he didn't say this, I would have translated tzorach gufo to mean when the body of the thing is needed itself. Meaning it's not needed for its typical use, but rather for its body. The hammer is not meant here to build something, but rather I need it to open a walnut. Okay? Tzorach mekoma means if it is holding space that I need on Shabbos. For example, my wife's Shabbos candles are on the table on Shabbos day. They're not lit. The candles from last night, they're still there. And for lunch, we're going to be serving cholent, and that's the spot necessary to put the cholent pot. So she's allowed to move it off the table and put it in its proper place so that we can put the cholent on when the time comes. Okay? So you'll find once you can handle a vessel, a muktzah, which is typically melachto l'isur, in a case where you can handle it, you're allowed to you can put it back exactly where it belongs afterwards. You don't have to drop it the second you're not using it for what you're allowed to. We'll talk about it, okay? So the two categories that you're allowed to handle it is if it's needed you need it for something other than the Shabbos forbidden act that it's meant for, or you need the place that it's occupying, okay? How are we doing for time? Okay, I think we're good, right? We got 15 minutes, no? Okay, so let's talk about, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to discuss litzorach gufo, when it's needed for itself, and litzorach mekomo, when its space is needed. Here goes. One is permitted to move this type of item for one of two purposes. We said, tzorach gufo, right? Litzorach gufo is the term for a situation in which one needs the muktzah item for a permissible use. Example, one may use a hammer or pliers to crack a nut if a nutcracker is not available. How much nuts could a nutcracker crack if a nutcracker could crack nuts? One may use, that's a Tzfat riddle. One may use scissors to cut string around a box of matzos or a bakery cake if a knife is not available. See that? Scissors is used to cut things to particular size and shape, which is very problematic on Shabbos, as we will see by mechatech. Okay? However, scissors are used also to cut things that you're allowed to cut on Shabbos, like a paste. You're allowed to open up food wrappers and things that are between you and the food, right, on Shabbos. Like you can open up a bag of chips, you can cut open a box.
You can do it with scissors.
So here, let's say you have a string, you got a fancy cake from a bakery, and I don't know, when I was growing up in America and in places in Europe, when you buy something from a pastry shop, it comes with twine or string, it's tied up, right? Now, you're not allowed to undo a knot on Shabbos, just like you can't tie a knot on Shabbos. But you could cut that string open. You can cut it open with a knife. You're allowed to use a knife on Shabbos. But if you don't have a knife available, and you got to eat that cake, because that's your oneg Shabbos, and the guests are here. So you could take scissors out of a drawer and cut the string, because you're allowed to cut the string. And even though you can't use the scissors for what they're meant to do on Shabbos, because that would be a Shabbos prohibited activity, you could use it here, just like the hammer on the walnut. You can use the scissors on the string for the cake, okay? Or a box of matzah when the knife is not available. Okay, a pot containing leftover food. So let's say you have leftover food in a pot. You can handle it and put it away, even though the pot would be muktzah when empty. You can't just handle pots and pans that are meant for cooking on Shabbos without a use for them, because the pot is presently required for a permissible use, meaning holding food. You're not using it as a pot. You're using it as a vessel to hold food, so that's not a problem. So you see how you use the thing. If you can use it in a way that avoids its Shabbos prohibited use and it's necessary for what you're doing now for Shabbos, it's not a problem. An electric fan. An electric fan may be moved or adjusted if it is needed elsewhere. For example, the fan may be moved to blow in a needed direction while being extremely careful not to accidentally pull the plug. Similarly, pull the plug. Meaning as long as you know you're not going to endanger, you're not going to start or stop an electrical function, which would be forbidden on Shabbos, then you can handle it. If it's within reason that you can carefully handle it and not transgress Shabbos, then you can. Similarly, an electric heater may be moved to where it's needed.
Can you lower the strength?
You can't do anything that's a function of electricity. You're saying that mechanically, how to turn the knob? I don't know how it works, but I don't think so. I think here you're allowed to move it. The point is you can handle it.
Somebody can make it less hot or less weak with the fan, but you can't make it stronger. It didn't make sense to me.
I know that that's. I can't comment on that at all. That sounds very suspicious to me. I don't see at all why that would be okay. And really, whether you can or not is a question of whether you're activating, you're using a function that's electric or not. But really, the point is, remember, with Muktzah, we're talking about handling things. And here, we're not saying you could turn the fan on or off. We're not saying that you could do any function on it. We're saying that you could point it or move it in order to make use of it. So provided that the handling doesn't transgress Shabbos. Okay. Some electric heaters are equipped with safety sensor switches that shut them off automatically if they're moved. Especially here in Israel, right? You knock something over, you lift it up off the ground and immediately it goes off. These may not be moved on Shabbos because, right, it's only permissible handling that would not, trigger a function. Okay, so that's when you need it for something permissible on Shabbos. The second use that you're allowed to have for this type of muktzah item on Shabbos, we said, is litzorech mekomo, for the need of its space, its occupying space. Litzorech mekomo is the term for a situation in which the individual needs the space that the item presently occupies. For example, a hair dryer that was left on the Shabbos table may be removed to make room for place settings. Plain and simple. And you don't have to worry about accidentally, blowing your hair on Shabbos because it's not plugged in. So a hammer, a paintbrush, a shoe brush, a hat brush, a pen, a flashlight, left on a chair needed for sitting or on a table where a place setting is needed may be removed and put away to provide space. An electric vacuum cleaner may be put away if it is occupying needed space or is an obstruction. Okay? However,
take care that before Shabbat they're not there. This is from the first place, right? If they're there and you need, if your son, one of the children put them there, whatever, they forgot. No?
I'm not sure. It's interesting because he brought the example before. He said if a child places a rock on the table, you're allowed to brush it off. Right? So, meaning with your elbow. You can't handle it with your hands. When we talked about the different permissible ways of handling muktzah. So over there, where the child put it on, you don't want it on the table, but you don't need the space. If the child put it on the place in the table where you need that space, you could just lift it and put it outside where it belongs, okay? So here I don't think we're penalizing anybody for not preparing the space before Shabbos and saying, since he did it on Shabbos, since the space was available on Shabbos, now if it gets occupied, he can move it. I don't think we make that distinction here. I think if you need the space for Shabbos, let's say you just realized you need the space now, and the vacuum cleaner's out there, you didn't realize. So we don't have any problem at all handling this litzorach. You can move it totally, as long as you know it's not going to violate Shabbos, handling it somehow, it's not a problem. However, if the appliance or similar muktzah item does not really occupy any needed space, but is merely an eyesore on the Shabbos table, you're embarrassed because you have guests over and you set this beautiful table, and there's a video game. I don't know, your kid's video game is, on the corner there on the table, or somebody's art project, right? So, and it's an eyesore on the Shabbos table or in the room. It may not be moved. You need to have tzorech mekomo. You can't. It's not shtick. Yeah. Yeah, okay? Because also Chazal understood through human nature that when there is a need for the space, we know you will handle it in a way that is only to take care of the space and you won't start messing with it. But if we just allowed you to move it, even if you don't like it in the room, we're basically saying we're allowing you to handle it any way you want. You can hold it and think about where to put it, meaning we're basically undoing Muktzah. So that's a very important distinction that they understood through human nature. Okay. I'm just going to do one more short, here we'll talk about other forms of Muktzah, because we have a few minutes. Okay. Other forms of Muktzah. In addition to the three principal categories of Muktzah that we talked about, there are other forms. There's, these are minor categories. Muktzah machmat mius. It's Muktzah because it's repulsive. Things that we just don't want to engage on Shabbos because it's so gross, you know. Talk about what that is in a second. And Muktzah machmas mitzvah, and it's or something that is Muktzah due to a mitzvah. We have to explain what that is. And then there's something called nolad. Nolad is a category. It's kind of it's an interesting category. It means that which was born, meaning it's a result of a process that didn't result. It was not here before Shabbos came in. Shabbos came in now, and now it's process. It's a new thing that was in the world that wasn't fully formed before Shabbos. So it wasn't here before Shabbos, so we don't allow you to interact with it. It wasn't available for you on Shabbos. An example would be a freshly laid egg. If a chicken laid an egg on Shabbos, right? Can you use it on Shabbos if it was not usable the day before Shabbos? Okay? So that's called nolad, when it's born. It's born on Shabbos. So Muktzah machmas mius. What's the category of Muktzah due to repulsiveness? This category includes objects or substances that would not ordinarily be handled because they are revolting to human sensitivities. Example, a dead rodent, badly spoiled food, or a soiled diaper. However, under a special exemption known as graf shel re'i, repulsive items may be removed if their presence is revolting or extremely disturbing. I mean, we don't allow you to play with these things if you get your kicks that way. But if you dafka want to get rid of it, absolutely, you can handle it to the degree that you need to get rid of it. Okay? A dead rodent, a repulsive insect, or a soiled diaper may be removed from the kitchen or living room because their presence is very revolting. Muktzah machmas mitzvah. What does it mean that it is muktzah due to a mitzvah? Any item that was dedicated and exclusively reserved for a mitzvah is muktzah because these items have limited use due to their special mitzvah status. For example, during Sukkot, even during Chol HaMoed, schach on a sukkah may not be used for any purpose other than the sukkah requirement. You can't take your mat, your schach mat off your sukkah to the beach to use it as a mat, and then when you go home, put it back, decide, hey, I'm just going to borrow it, right? It's muktzah. It's off limits for you, right? For use. Mitzvah items of these types are therefore not prepared for Shabbos use and are consequently muktzah. What about your arba minim, your lulav? Can't mess with that on Shabbos, right? Besides from the fact that we don't handle the arba minim on Shabbos because we're concerned you'll carry them. But sukkah decorations, a lulav, hadassim, aravot, leftover oil from a Hanukkah menorah, even if it was transferred to a non-muktzah container prior to Shabbos, a shofar on Rosh Hashanah, all of these mitzvah items may not be moved or handled on Shabbos or Yom Tov, even if they became detached on their own. See further. I'm not sure what that means, but we'll see further. However, if the mitzvah item has other permissible uses, it's not muktzah. For example, a Megillah. Let's say you have a Megillat Esther. It's an item, an object used to fulfill the mitzvah of reading the Megillah on Purim, right? According to this category, it would be muktzah because due to a mitzvah. However, let's say you wanted to read or study the Megillah, and that's the only text you had. That's a permissible use. So that would be something that would make that not muktzah, then. That's why it was not in this category. Okay? One may handle an esrog on Shabbos because it has a very pleasant fragrance, and you can use it for that permissible purpose and make a bracha. So an esrog, even though it would be in the category of the lulav and the hadassim, but it has a separate permissible Shabbos use, and therefore can be handled. Don't forget to recite the correct bracha, Asher nasan reach tov beperot. Right? Blessed be God, creator of the world, who put a pleasant smell in fruit. Okay, and then we're just going to one last paragraph to start off. Actually, we'll stop here. We have to discuss nolad being born on Shabbos. Hopefully we'll pick up next time. Baruch Hashem Li'olam. Amen v'amen.
Amen.